hang out there on social media. That's where you're going to be interacting with us. If you want to check us out on TV, though, grab that QR code right above Dr. Jim's head. You can see right there above the old live right there. That'll take you to all of our different apps, all of our different streams that you can watch us on kind of more traditional television.
Well, and look at the list. I mean, Roku, TCL, Vizio, Tubi, Apple TV. I mean, we're all over the place. Android, iPhone, Amazon Live. I mean, we really are on a lot of platforms.
Oh yeah. There's so many out there. Easiest way that I've found to watch us is through Pluto. That feels like an easy way to. You just kind of log in. And boom,
there it is.
We're under like news and something or other.
Yeah,
section.
no, and also Samsung. Well, even Samsung. Now, if you buy a Samsung TV, it's already pre-installed.
All right, well,
so that's pretty easy as well too. That way you can join us on both ends. Now, the benefit of being on the social media side of things is that you can send us comments. You can actually ask us questions and things, and we will try to respond to you throughout the show today.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to be doing here as we go, all hour long. We're going to be talking all things Aaron. We'll mix in some other top weather headlines that we've got here, whether it's, talking about the heat.
Lots of that.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, crazy heat.
What else is new, right? And, of course, we're going to be talking to Josh Morgerman here as well.
That's true. We're going to have some fun with our favorite hurricane hunter. And, by the way, have you ever been, watching something and you wanted to yell? And I know that, Josh, we can see you right now. So, Josh, have you ever wanted to yell at the TV? And in this case, you don't have to yell anymore. You can just ask us a question on social media.
Oh yeah, no, that happens all the time. Actually, I have to limit my watching to certain channels now.
Do you yell a lot, Josh? Just out of curiosity.
I call it low-level grumbling, on the sofa in the living room, I would say.
Yeah, I'm definitely a grumbler. Yes, grumbling, that's actually a pretty good word. So today we're gonna be talking obviously about Erin. You and I are gonna have a little discussion about some historical things as well. This time of year, we do the day in history for weather history. We do it every day. This time of year, everything's almost a hurricane was making landfall, or a hurricane made landfall and then rained, and so we're gonna talk a little bit about that as well. So we're gonna start on television here in just about 1 minute, which means we're gonna go silent just for a few seconds, and then we're gonna pop right back up again. And we'll start from there. So we got a lot to talk about today.
I'm betting folks on social media won't even notice a difference here. They'll just think we, collected ourselves, caught our breath, and, composed ourselves here in about 30 seconds or so. We're kind of just shutting up for a second.
But you'll notice we can talk a little more freely on social media than, we get a little bit more official once we get onto the live TV stuff. There are certain rules. That don't apply to social media, which is kind of one of the reasons why I like it so much.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Join us here in about 10 seconds or so. But hey, if you wanted to hang out,
6,
by all means, you can be on
5,
social media the entire time, guys.
4, yes, we'll see you in a second. Good morning and welcome to another edition of Doctor and the Dude. Well, the dude's not here quite yet, but meteorologist Kevin Schneider's here with me. I'm Dr. Jim Siebert. Kevin, how you doing this morning?
I'm a dude, not the dude. That is a big difference here. We're not doing too bad as all things considered. We've got a hurricane spinning in the Atlantic Basin, and at the same time, it's taking about the best possible track we could possibly see. Okay.
Today's conditions would be a lot worse if it was going to make landfall. So that's already been established. Yeah. We know that Erin is not going to make landfall, but that doesn't mean we're going to have some problems.
Yeah, and as always, we're going to be taking over this entire hour. If you want to hang out with us, follow us on your favorite social media platform. If you want to just watch us kind of like you're doing now on traditional television, grab that QR code right there. It'll take you to all of our apps. Just pick the easiest one, the ones you got logins for. As we go forward this hour.
And that way you can ask us questions that we will try to answer throughout the hour as well. And when I say answer questions, that means we need to bring in our favorite hurricane hunter, Josh Morgerman. Josh, how are you doing this morning?
Oh, doing good. On the second cup of coffee, I'm feeling like signs of life.
Good.
I can think now.
Good. I'm glad we're on that second cup already. That's a good start. All right, let's talk about Erin. Okay, we've been talking about Erin for more than a week now, and Erin is almost as close to the U.S. as it's going to get.
Yeah, wow. It just feels like we've been talking about this thing forever. And that is the case with these African systems that they come off the African coast around the Cape Verde or Cabo Verde Islands and they start that long trek across. They're on the weather map forever. And it just feels like we can't, it's like gum stuck to your shoe. You can't get rid of the topic. And we're in the thick of it now. We're going to be talking about it for another couple of days, probably.
You know, one of the things I've noticed different this morning as we look at the satellite imagery we were just looking at a second ago. Yesterday, the storm was kind of had a right sort of side was pretty organized. We didn't really have the left side filling in, but today we have that whole circulation going on.
Yeah, it's looking a little better today. I remember thinking yesterday it was looking kind of asymmetric. That western side looked a little kind of rotted away, like maybe some wind shear was hitting it. And this is pretty common. I think some folks are surprised that a hurricane in its life cycle will go through intensity fluctuations. It'll get really strong, then it'll kind of get ragged, then it'll get strong again. There's some pulsing going on. Now, we don't expect it to really bomb out and go nutty again. Could get a little stronger again, but like probably shouldn't get too crazy because it's pulling out of the tropics now.
Yeah, the one thing I see is I'm looking at this better organization today, might give it a little better ability to actually produce more storm surge before it starts to take that right-hand turn and move away.
Absolutely. One interesting thing about Erin is that, hurricanes come in all shapes and sizes. This one is big. And, the size of a hurricane is separate from its intensity. A hurricane can be very, intense but small. This one's really large. Tropical storm force winds extend outward, I think like 265 miles. Hurricane force winds extend outward 90 miles. That means that even though this thing is not going to make landfall or come anywhere near making landfall in the United States, it is absolutely going to bring some impacts to portions of the East Coast. Serious impacts. We're talking storm surge, dangerous waves, riptides, and tropical storm conditions. Wind.
The size of this storm really, I think, is the huge part of the story, as you were just mentioning. So we've got the tropical storm force winds extending out to more than 200 miles, but that's on both sides. So this storm is actually filling in the area from the East Coast all the way to Bermuda. And by the way, if you ever wanted to see how far away Bermuda is, it's a long way from the East Coast.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like Erin is kind of field goaling right between the Outer Banks and Bermuda, and both both sides are getting some action from this thing, which just shows you the dimensions of this storm. It also shows you, like Kevin said earlier, that Erin is taking, when you really step back and look at it, it's taking the best possible course. It passed north of the Caribbean islands. They got a little rough weather, but the course stayed offshore, passed east of the Bahamas and the Turks and Caicos. And now it's going between the U.S. and Bermuda, and then it's going to hook east south of Atlantic Canada. So everyone's kind of getting, I don't want to say lucky because there are going to be some serious impacts on the Outer Banks of North Carolina. But all things considered, with a large, dangerous hurricane in the Atlantic, we're getting kind of lucky with this one.
Well, I think when you look at it in terms of, yes, unfortunately, we're probably going to lose some homes on the Outer Banks, but not nearly the kind of devastation we'd have if this thing was actually making landfall. So whether that's lucky or not, or fortunate, there are going to be some people that are going to, of course, have a very difficult time with this, but at least it's not going to do what it could have done at the size of this storm.
Absolutely. With hurricanes, everything is relative. If they come anywhere near the United States, we're going to get some adverse impacts. But hopefully with this one, hopefully they'll be minimized. We'll see.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And of course, we're going to be talking more about that coming up during this half hour with Josh. But let's also get an update of what's going on with the radar, which is actually pretty active in other parts of the country.
Yeah, Tracy Anthony standing by here. What's the latest we got going on?
We've got a couple hot spots that are dealing with some shower activity and some storms. The Northeast in particular, that's one area. Most of this is just rain, so not too many stormy activity just yet, or storm activity just yet. But then if we go down to the South Central, we're watching a cold front. Kevin, Jim, this is where we're going to be tracking a lot of the severe storms later on in the day. So I'll have more details coming up.
Things are just getting started.
Yeah, just heating up out there. I know the heat's a big factor of that as well, too. So, as always, hey, fire your questions at us. Whether it's tropical in nature or not, we can try to answer them. Let us know where you're at as well, and we'll try to kind of fine-tune some of those answers.
Absolutely. So click on the QR code here to get to your favorite spot, or, of course, ask us those questions during the hour. All right, we're still live on social media. I had a hard time with that last sentence, if you notice.
It happens.
Occasionally, I was thinking one thing and something else
my throat in the middle
came
of
out of my mouth. So, yeah, that's why it's live. It is absolutely live.
The perils of live TV. Yeah, sometimes you're stuck. Yesterday, I was talking to Tracy, and I was hoping to the heavens. She did not say something back to me because I was holding back about the biggest cough I had.
Excuse me.
Yeah, one of them.
I get that, absolutely. Hey, let's bring Josh back in. Josh, I believe we have a question for you. I'm not sure where that's coming from, though.
Yeah, and it looks like it was coming from Facebook there. It says, Josh, I know you find the strongest winds in a hurricane, but how do you find the eye wall while avoiding that storm surge?
Well, that's always like the big question. It depends where I'm hunting the hurricane. One sort of unique thing about hurricanes hitting the United States is we get really bad storm surges here. And a lot of that is because of what happens underneath the water offshore. Off the Gulf Coast of the U.S. and off a lot of the East Coast, we have very shallow water. The slope of the continental shelf is very gentle. Shallow water means bigger storm surges, and we get some of the worst here in the United States. In other places like the west coast of Mexico or Taiwan and Japan, oftentimes surge is not a big factor. You don't even have to worry about it that much. You won't get that much. So it really just depends. If I'm in the United States where storm surge is a real concern, it's always about your elevation. It's not about how far you are from the ocean. It's how high you are, and just making sure that whatever I do, I'm high enough to escape that storm surge.
You know, on a related note to this question, kind of taking the next step with this question, Josh, when you're hunting a hurricane, you have to try to kind of figure out where that eye is going to make landfall. How do you do that when you're like 1 or 2 days out? Because you have to get yourself in the right place before it actually starts to happen.
It's a matter of zeroing in. I think that like a day or two out, you start to have an idea of where it's going to come in, but you don't know exactly. And then as you get closer to that time, you kind of get closer and closer to knowing. It's usually in the final hours that I make my final decision on where I'm going to be. Hurricanes come in all shapes and sizes. Like I said before, the hardest ones to hunt are the ones that are very small with very tiny eyes, because then we're talking about, we're really fine tuning just down to kind of miles. Now, the hardest kind of hunting is on islands, because usually you have to pick an island, a good day before the storm hits, because once it gets close, all the airports shut down, and whatever island you pick is the one that you are stuck on.
Yeah, the word stuck actually has a lot of meaning, because you might be stuck there for a couple of days.
Yeah, and also stuck in the sense that I can't adjust to a different island if the hurricane turns to start to go somewhere else. I call it island roulette. It's the toughest kind of hurricane hunting when you're hopping between islands. For example, in the Bahamas, in Japan's Okinawa Islands, in parts of the Philippines, it's all just island hopping.
Yeah, and they're really close together. And so, and it's interesting, 10 miles, and you could either be in the middle of it or you could be on the outer edges or not even close.
Exactly. A hurricane is any hurricane is large, but the part that the kind of the scary part, I call it the eye wall, the core of the hurricane, that is a very sharply defined area. It's a ring near the center. And if you miss that, you kind of miss the storm. You'll get some effects, but you won't get the full impact.
Hey, let's talk history for just a second. this week kind of marks I guess an anniversary of sorts of some pretty big storms. Especially, I know you have some more information about Camille, for example.
Yeah, Camille. Now, when I was growing up, Hurricane Camille was the benchmark of American hurricanes. It brushed southeast Louisiana and then slammed into Mississippi on August 17th, 1969. This was a Category 5, second strongest hurricane in American history, came ashore with estimated winds of 175 miles an hour. The eye actually passed over right here, right where I am in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. The entire Mississippi coast was devastated. Second highest storm surge in American history. Many lives lost, many towns smashed. And around here, when you talk to people, anyone over 60 who grew up here, the memories of that night, and it was a very scary storm, are just burned into their memories.
You know, and back then, I mean, everybody didn't have cameras on their phones or the ability to see everything. So we saw a lot of images, but at the same time, we didn't see nearly the amount of images if like Camille happened today.
Oh, absolutely. That's one of the interesting things about Camille. Category 5 hurricane hitting a fairly populated region. The Mississippi coast, it doesn't have big cities, but it has a lot of towns like Biloxi, Gulfport, etc. But there's almost no footage from the storm hitting. It made landfall around 11:30 p.m. And back then, not everyone had a phone with a camera on it. So there's almost no footage of it coming ashore, this cataclysmic event. But what's interesting is to talk to neighbors to hear their memories, and they'll evoke images which are in a lot of ways just as vivid as video.
And talking about Category 5 hurricanes making landfall, it really doesn't happen all that often that it's literally at the Cat 5 status when making landfall. It just doesn't happen often.
Exactly. When you look at the lower 48 states, there have only been 4 known instances of a Category 5 hurricane crossing the coast when it was Category 5. As opposed to, for example, like Katrina, it was a Category 5 in the Gulf, but it was not Category 5 when it crossed the United States coastline. It had actually weakened to a 3.
Yeah, absolutely. So the history of it. That's why, Josh, I love talking with you so much. You are a walking history book when it comes to tropical weather. So we appreciate that. We're going to get back to you in just a couple of minutes here. We're going to jump over and talk to Tracy as well about what's going on Viper, because we do have some storms and we got some heat to talk about too.
Yeah, we've got a couple of those hot spots. So the Oklahoma-Texas line is where we have some rumbles of thunder definitely starting to develop. As for the Northeast, it's just some lighter rain showers to start off the day. But notice this boundary is a cold front that's going to drop across the area, and it's dropping right into this heat and humidity. So we have extreme heat warnings that are still in place. They've been in place for the last several days. And then we do have the heat advisories that are in place. So that's what's going to fuel the chance for the severe storms. But want to also take you out west, because this is where those weather conditions are heating up. And I know Kevin and I always talk about it's the desert Southwest. It's hot. It's nothing new, but we're starting to see and feel some extreme values. So areas like Phoenix could potentially break a record high throughout the day today and tomorrow. And we've seen these heat advisories continue to expand. And with some monsoonal moisture, we could definitely start to feel those dew points creep up. So areas like Phoenix, where it's usually that dry air, is going to start to feel a little sticky. I know you guys know what that feels like in Denver when that dew point starts to creep up there as well.
Oh, if it creeps up just a tiny bit in the Denver area, everybody complains. Yeah. But when you have excessive heat warnings going on in places like Phoenix and Vegas, where they're used to the heat, I mean, you got to know that that's really, really bad.
Oh yeah, you can feel when you're used to a pretty arid climate, kind of like we are here in Denver, but especially down in Phoenix. Any sort of increase in the dew point temperature, so you can feel it kind of climb up your back.
Oh, yeah,
you get clammy.
Not a good feel or a good look. All right, hey, speaking about taking a look around, Jonathan Petromala, one of our correspondents, he is on the ground right there on the Outer Banks, and he has a report for us now what's happening out there at the moment.
You just see the insane vulnerability here in the Outer Banks of North Carolina to the Atlantic Ocean. This is Rodanthe, and there are numerous homes that are exposed, literally sitting in the surf, and this is days ahead of the worst of the surf that will be generated from Hurricane Erin. Since 2020, 11 homes have collapsed, washed away by surf here in the Outer Banks. This is one of the most vulnerable sections here in Rodanthe because the dunes just get washed away by the power of this surf. Now, the high tide cycles is when this area is going to be most vulnerable over the next few days as the hurricane gets closer and closer, likely to still stay a couple of 100 miles offshore, but still the massive wind field will push this water in 4 to 6 feet of surge on top of waves that will be much larger than what you're seeing here. And that has the potential to reshape this coastline, including wiping away homes that have sat here for decades. I'm going to cover the impacts here on the Outer Banks for Weather Nation. I'm Jonathan Petramala.
Man, it's going to be interesting to see what unfolds there because, you know, I've been around for a little bit and been here for a little while as well, doing national, you know, coverage. I don't know what this kind of a storm is going to do because the wind field is so broad, and I feel like we haven't dealt with that for a little while at least.
Well, and when you see the images of the waves coming on shore and kind of that side view where you see the homes off in the distance, you can really tell that beach is disappearing. In fact, where those homes are now that are out in the water, that used to be back a ways from where the beach was. So if I had a home anywhere on the Outer Banks, I would be very concerned right now.
Yeah, it makes you a little nervous to buy some beachfront property. Tracy, what do you think? You in the market for anything beachfront here?
No, you know, I don't think beachfront, but it will be interesting to see, you know, kind of what changes, because I know after every storm, you know, they kind of have to redraw the maps there.
Yeah.
I wonder why we don't see things like, you know, on other areas on the East Coast, they have like massive boulders, or they have concrete, you know, barriers that are kind of in between that will slow that down. Seems like that might not be a bad idea to have out there.
And I think they once upon a time relied to the sand dunes and stuff like that. And they've had a lot of storms just cause all sorts of havoc. But I want to get back to Tracy here and talk about, you know, a little deeper dive on some of this heat. It is nasty out there in some spots.
You know, and we've had these heat advisories in effect for several days, but what we're going to be talking about next is how this heat impacts you or your kids if they play sports. You know, August is the month where everybody goes back to two-a-days, football practice starts, and that's when we really start to see some issues with heat exhaustion. So I'm going to have more details on that coming up.
Yeah, looks like got some ball security issue there with the old B-roll. Ball on the ground, yeah. It's hopefully, you know, it's one of those things. I can't imagine going through practice with some of those pads. That's incredible.
Well, and I also noticed too, we didn't get to talk about it yet because it's kind of a small area, but up in Montana, they have heat advisories going on up there too.
Yeah.
So it's like the triangle, it's like the Bermuda Triangle of heat in the western part of the U.S.
The Bermuda Triangle. Exactly, you know. So if you're in the central part, that's you guys. You guys are right in the middle of it.
Oh, that's true. We are in the middle of it, aren't we?
Yeah.
Well, we're not
A little
going to.
bit.
We are definitely not going to disappear. I will tell you that much right now. Okay, thanks, Tracy. We'll be back to you a little bit later on. Okay, coming up here in about 15 seconds, we're going to be live again on television. And here's those different ways you can watch us on TV, but of course stay on social media where you can continue to submit questions to us, and we will answer them. We'll be back on in just a few seconds. Good morning and welcome to Weather Nation. We're still talking with Josh Morgerman. Kevin's here with me, and we have been talking about Erin so far this morning. Also, we had a little bit more about some of the heat that's going on in the western part of the country. But Erin right now is the top headline here in the United States.
And it's going to be for a lot of the rest of the week. I can guarantee you that. This looks like a little bit of video, the old hurricane hunters as they're flying into Hurricane Erin. Man, look at that. The old stadium effect. That is never going to disappoint. No matter, the only disappointment is the fact that you got a monster of a hurricane, but it's always a gorgeous sight when you see that there, Jim.
And the power of it too is always amazing to me whenever I look at this. So let's talk a little bit more about what's going on with Erin, and we're going to also talk a little bit more about what we expect to happen over the next few days. Josh Morgerman, our favorite hurricane hunter, is here with us this morning. So Josh, first just give us a quick update here of what we expect the worst of the things to be with Erin today, especially for the Outer Banks. I believe we can't hear Josh right now. He looks great, but we can't quite hear him.
Actually,
There he is. Now he's back.
I'm here.
Carry on, Josh.
My mic was on mute. I apologize. So Erin is a good example of how a hurricane does not need to make landfall to create problems. The center's going to be well offshore, but because it's such a large storm with such big wind radii, there are going to be some pretty serious effects on the east coast of the United States. There's going to be tropical storm conditions today on North Carolina's Outer Banks. Big, huge waves, lots of serious erosion, and real storm surge up to possibly 4 feet. Very serious conditions, and those are going to move up into Virginia and the mid-Atlantic states tomorrow. So it's the core of it's going to stay offshore, but there are going to be some very serious impacts in exposed places in the United States over the next 48 hours.
Well, and now we're getting closer and closer to the peak of hurricane season, and we are always watching this conveyor belt of storms coming off of Africa out into the Atlantic and which the directions they're going to go. Talk a little bit more about what we expect to have happening between now and even over the next couple of weeks.
Absolutely. For folks, for kind of the nerdier people out there who go on the National Hurricane Center site and look at it, they'll see on the Outlook map, there's like literally a conveyor belt of tropical waves coming off of Africa and marching across the Atlantic. This is the time of year, exactly the time of year that we watch for those. This is what we call Cape Verde or Cabo Verde season, because that's the area where these waves originate. Most of them, they might become hurricanes, but most of them curve harmlessly out to sea. However, a lot of the worst, most legendary hurricanes in American history were these Cape Verde, these African systems that came all the way across. Ones like Hurricane Donna of 1960, Ivan more recently, Ike was another one. These were storms. The 1938 hurricane that smashed Long Island, New York, and New England. These were all these Cape Verde hurricanes. You can see the list there. A lot of viewers have probably been through some of these hurricanes, remember them. Those were storms that started out near Africa, and we tracked them forever for 10 days or 2 weeks before they made it to the United States. And that season is mid-August to kind of mid-September, or late August to mid-September is when we have to watch for those. So we're in that season now, and that's why we're watching that conveyor belt of waves coming off Africa.
Well, and we were just showing it a second ago too, the next system that's behind Erin looks like it's going to take a similar pattern and follow around that strong Bermuda high and stay away from the U.S. coastline. But like you said, though, we have more storms that are still coming. I mean, we're not done. You know, as people continue to kind of say, well, it's slowing down. It's not slowing down. It's actually picking up. The question is whether or not we can keep these things away from the U.S.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because the next disturbance in the conveyor belt, like you said, Dr. Jim, it looks like that one's going to kind of follow on Erin's footsteps. There's a weakness in that mid-Atlantic ridging that Erin found and is going into. Good news for us. And it looks like that next disturbance is going to do the same thing. It's going to find that weakness and it's going to recurve out into the Atlantic. The question in my mind is what's going to happen with the one after that. It's called Invest 99L. It looks pretty robust. That one is actually near the Cape Verde or Cabo Verde Islands. What's going to happen with that one? Right now, it's hard to tell. There's sort of like a mix of scenarios from the computer models. If you think of the sort of like weather map as a chessboard, we have a lot of time for the chess pieces to kind of move around before we know what's going to happen with that one that's out near Africa now. And that's the one that I'm watching most closely, because we just don't know yet if we're going to be safe from that one or if it's going to make it across.
Yep, we have to keep our eye on what's going on in the tropics, absolutely. Okay, Josh, we're going to be back to you in just a second. Let's go over to Tracy now. Let's talk a little bit about heat and football.
Yeah, it's this time of year that everybody goes back to playing sports. You have the two-a-days for people just moving back into the high school year. And oftentimes this is when heat stroke can impact sports players. And football is actually the most risky sport to play when we're talking about heat strokes and heat related illnesses. So a lot of these heat stroke related illnesses happen throughout the month of August with unsupervised practice or two-a-days, but wrestling and cross country can also have big major impacts, and oftentimes those athletes are very susceptible to heat stroke as well. So coming up though, we are going to switch gears a little bit and talk about how your cruise liners handle a tropical situation like Hurricane Erin.
That is an interesting point. You don't think about it till you see that shot there with all those cruise ships, and yeah, that's a big deal.
I know one person that'll think about it. Jesse Kelly. He'll be here later today. Hey, we're going to go talk with Josh Morgerman here on social media. Got a couple of questions that you folks are asking. Some of them really good. I'm looking to hear his answers on these.
Coming up. All right, so just a few seconds away from television. We're still live on our social media, so we're going to have some questions for Josh. This is one of my favorite times when people have questions for him, because it just sort of opens up everything as far as, well, it's fun. Okay, we're weather geeks, okay? We've established that we're weather geeks, so we love to talk about this stuff.
Yeah, we've got our base. That's for sure. That you can tell who's been hanging out with us for quite a while. Of course, the first one I'll start with, Josh, is from Lois, one of our best ones here on YouTube. Is it possible that the waves coming off of Africa, after Erin, are any of those, is there a possibility, and you kind of touched on it, of those getting into the Gulf, and what probability would you probably give those right now?
It's a great question. And hi, Lois. Yeah, Lois is one of our most faithful viewers. Great to hear from you. So that's the big question. That's the $1 million question always is, can these systems get all the way across? Right now, there's that big weakness in the ridging in the Atlantic, so there's a way for them to escape before getting to North America. I would say with that sort of one that's furthest east, 99L, too early to say. When you look at the ensemble computer models, and the ensemble models will show a lot of different scenarios based on slightly different starting parameters, you'll see many of the ensemble members curve it out to sea, but some get it into the Gulf. So it's an unsatisfactory answer to say that we don't know and that there's a chance it could get into the Gulf, but that's where we are right now. We just have to kind of watch it. We should know more in the next week as the chess pieces fall into place.
Well, and as I've been looking at some things too, there's just so many questions we just don't know yet, at least at this point. But speaking of questions, we have another one for you, Josh.
Yeah.
This is hot off the press.
Yeah, from @nature_techie, I believe that's how they want us to pronounce it. Watching these evacuations reminds me of the crucial adaptive coastal planning, or how crucially adaptive coastal planning is. I hope everyone stays safe and that we keep pushing for smarter resilience along our shores. What do you guys think about that?
Well, it's kind of more of a statement than a question, but I think I brought that up when I was looking at like this particular, when you see a long shot and you see that they're really, all there is sand that's between those, that's the barrier. And in my experience has been, if it's sand, it's not going to last.
I think this is something that everybody needs to think about as they're building or choosing homes along the coast. I know in coastal Mississippi, this is a big topic. Katrina wiped out my town, Bay St. Louis, and a lot of the kind of neighboring towns. And as people have built back, there are a lot of rules now around, okay, how high the house has to be and where it has to be, because they're trying to sort of minimize that to kind of take into account that we're going to get more of these hurricanes. This is just how it is. And sort of, let's try to be smart about where we put things. Let's not put a house on the train tracks, so to speak. So let's not put it somewhere where we know there's going to be problems.
Well, and it's obviously extremely expensive to do any type of planning for coastal things, especially when it comes to tropical systems like on the Outer Banks that gets hit all the time. But at the same time, it's almost like you have to weigh that balance between that expense and then the expense of actually fixing problems and then rebuilding homes or and infrastructure. So it's complicated.
Yeah, and there's always going to be that sort of fine balance. I know when I was building my house, on the Mississippi coast, I bought land and built a house, and I had to decide how close to the Gulf did I want to be. It gives me joy to stand on my front lawn and see the Gulf, but it's also kind of dangerous. And where was that line for me? You know what I mean? If I really want to just be totally safe, I'd build 100 miles to the north. But that the sea, the seafront, it draws us all in. We all just love living, close to the coast. There's magic to it, and occasionally it comes with problems.
Well, and my experience, obviously, spending most of my career in Texas and the Gulf Coast, a lot of the Gulf Coast areas now have seawalls that are basically giant concrete barriers. And it doesn't make it look bad. It actually just makes things safe. And we actually have learned now it does make a difference.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think the best example in the United States is closer to where you used to be, the Galveston seawall. Galveston was wiped out by a Category 4 hurricane, 1900, deadliest disaster in American history. And then afterward, they built a seawall, and it has done a lot to protect the city. It doesn't protect it completely, but it does actually help kind of minimize the storm surge inundation in the city in a lot of events. So seawalls absolutely make a difference.
Yeah, and if anything, it as a wave is coming in, it sort of cuts it down a little bit. It loses a little bit of that momentum. So, and there's a number of ways to do that too. But all I know is if I had property or a home on the Outer Banks, I would look into doing that myself if I had to, and get with my neighbors or something, because it really would possibly make a difference. Again, as much as we try, as many mitigation activities as we do, Mother Nature always finds a way to prove us wrong, but we can lessen some of our problems, I think.
Yeah, and to that point, we've been talking with Roseanne Cole on Facebook, and her question was, why in the world would you build a home there? And Josh, you kind of touched on that. I do want to talk to Caleb William, though, on Facebook, who asked what the exact wave height they're expecting there is going to be. And that kind of depends on what you call a wave height. Is it the wave or is it the storm surge? Because they're going to get both on the Outer Banks.
And also what location, because it's going to be different all along the coast. Even in the Outer Banks, you're going to see a tremendous difference. But I think easily to answer that question is that on the high end, we would expect waves about 20 feet.
Yeah, and that's hard to wrap your head around. That's two stories tall.
So stand up and look up and triple yourself, for the most part, and that's about the height that we're going to be. But also, I think that we're also going to see, as far as storm surge or swells or elevated tides, you can add to that as well. Josh, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the important thing, what I always think about is, okay, what is this storm surge? And, which is not the wave height, but the actual rise in the water level. Hurricane Center is saying 2 to 4 feet on the Outer Banks. Now, that might not sound like a lot to some folks, but actually along a lot of the U.S. Gulf Coast and East Coast, 4 feet is a lot of water, because a lot of these areas, and as you guys probably saw in the video, there's not a lot of elevation on these barrier islands. 4 feet of water is a lot, and that's going to cover a lot of what is normally dry land and can actually be very dangerous. Just a couple of feet of inundation can sweep cars away, can do major damage to homes, and can jeopardize lives. So this is a serious situation, even though Erin is actually far out over the ocean.
Yeah, and I think that's why even though this is not going to make landfall, this is still a very serious situation with the storm, why we've been talking about it for so long, and we're going to keep talking about it until it moves away.
Until at least Sunday or Monday of next week. We're going to be here with it.
Josh, we appreciate your time this morning. It's always fun to talk with you, and I'm glad you were on your second cup of coffee, because you're right there. You're right where you need to be for the rest of the day. So we appreciate it, and we'll talk to you real soon.
Thanks, guys. Great to be with you.
All right. We're going to be moving on to some more kind of top weather headlines here as we go into, the next 20, 30 minutes or so. But we do want to remind folks.
Yeah.
We do have folks on the ground down there. Jonathan Petramala, Brandon Clement, both there in the Outer Banks, talking to some of the residents about how they're preparing.
We bought one in Avon, and that got hit by 2 storms, and it was like 6 feet of sand underneath it, and got a little scared of that. We sold that, then realized that maybe we jumped the gun too quick and bought the place here. We're gonna stick to this one here a little bit. Hope it works out. All right. Good wave. I don't know, I mean, human nature is to want to try and, we love the beach and people love the beach. The only way we could afford our house is by renting it. And we get to use it when it's not being rented. So, hope that everything works out, and try the best that you can,
Did you notice that he saved his drink? See
Which
that?
props,
Yeah.
props. That still made me clench though when I saw that wave come
Waist
up knee
high.
high.
It is waist.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll talk about
Can
impact.
take you out.
Yeah, Tracy. Now you're in like the capital of cruise ships in southern parts of Florida. So obviously these types of systems are going to have a big influence on that entire industry.
Yeah, and it's something you don't always think about, but a lot of cruise ship liners and travel companies have a team of meteorologists that are, kind of keeping an eye on that forecast because they have a lot of people in their care. They'll do seasonal routing. They make sure they're always communicating with their passengers. But nowadays, too, cruise ships themselves have speed and mobility. They travel 500 to 600 miles a day, so they can maneuver around storms like this. But wanted to give you some more detail. We talked to a former cruise ship meteorologist. Here's what he had to say.
For the cruise lines in general, you're not going to hear them make changes a week or 2 out because essentially every single one of these lines want to deliver the amazing vacation that you bought to the ports you bought, where you're going for that week. So it is very common, almost always, that if any change needs to be made, it's happening like right as the cruise is starting, or maybe a day or 2 in if you just need to drop one port. You may not need to have alterations for the entire cruise. It may just be one region that they want to stay out of to keep you more comfortable.
Always interesting to think about. I guarantee you weren't thinking about that here as we were thinking in terms of a hurricane. Let's kind of keep with that travel theme though, because we've got a couple of issues. Dallas, Texas right now looking okay, at least for now. You've got a ground stop though if you've got any sort of flight out of DFW. That could certainly be a little bit of a hindrance. Still going to be watching some of these storms as we go into, especially this afternoon. So if you've got any sort of travel plans up and down that I-35 corridor, yeah, you may get wet as we get into these next couple of days. The problem spots up into the northeast, you slide a little further to the west though. Hey, windows down right here. That is going to be it. I-70 between Indy and about Pittsburgh. That is going to be about the best looking drive we've got. Let's get you out to Illinois though and show you some interesting video. Oh, we got the old pupper. You never like seeing that. Way too much rain coming down in portions of Illinois earlier this week, Jim.
Yeah, and that's a lot of floodwater that is going on there. And so that's actually pretty dangerous. It's nighttime, there's floodwater that's rising, and there's your dog.
Yeah, I mean, good luck keeping old Fido out of some of the water out there. My dog is terrified of water. Don't know why. That's what I
it's the
said
bath.
too.
It's because you try to give him a bath, and,
Yeah.
and so you've ruined him.
Yeah,
You've
I tried
ruined him for
going
life.
easy over the last couple of weeks. Couldn't take the smell though. It kind of broke down. So we're gonna have to figure something out there.
Yeah, the smell does, it wins. All right, the Hurricane Hub continues here. We're gonna be live back on television in just a second, and we're gonna have a report from our correspondent, Jonathan Petramala, who's on the ground, or on the soggy ground, might
On
be
the
a better
beach,
way of putting
on the
that.
sand.
That's all coming up here in about 6 seconds.
A fantastic morning here in the Outer Banks. Beautiful weather, but that's going to change. You can hear the loud surf. These waves are big, but they're only going to be getting much larger as the day progresses. The winds will start to kick up here and Hurricane Erin will be coming closer. And with it, massive surf and some surge as well, and that could literally change how the Outer Banks looks, especially the homes that are sitting here exposed in the surf zone. Years ago when they were built inland, but decades of erosion has left them very, very vulnerable. Over the last year alone, several homes have collapsed into the surf, and the fear is that that will happen again with Hurricane Erin.
You know, maybe like this one and this one will be fine, but those two out there, one's already leaning pretty good, so I think I have a feeling that one's going in.
The next two high tide cycles, this evening and Thursday morning, those are likely going to bring in the most damaging surf here to the coastline in the Outer Banks, and I'll be covering the impacts. For WeatherNation, I'm Jonathan Petramala in Rodanthe, North Carolina.
Now here's a live look from Avon, North Carolina. You know, it's a beautiful day.
All things considered.
It really is.
Those waves look big, don't they?
And they're only going to be getting bigger as we go through the day, as the storm now is at that point where it really is going to start to push that water on shore.
Yeah, we're starting to see some of these impacts here going to ramp up as we get into these next couple of days. 100-mile-an-hour sustained winds, the latest from the National Hurricane Center, down to 948, which is kind of interesting. It looked like it was maybe fighting some dry air at times, so I was interested to see what they would come back with for that central pressure.
Well, as you look at the satellite imagery, you can see now it looks like a hurricane. We've got the whole circulation going. Those rain bands or cloud bands are wrapping around it. Yesterday, it was kind of more heavy on the right side, and you didn't see that circulation making it quite around. So, and now also the fact if the pressure is dropping, that typically means that the wind will be getting faster or going up just a little bit. But at this point though, it's kind of semantics. I mean, it doesn't really matter.
Right. Yeah.
It's not going to have a chance to get that much stronger. The conditions are going to be what they are. And one of the biggest stories for the last several days, not just a day, but the last couple of days at least, has been what's happening with those rip currents. And Tracy Anthony, you've been following that as well very closely from where you're at.
Yeah, rip currents is oftentimes a topic that we don't always discuss, or until now hasn't really been discussed frequently, but it does oftentimes take a lot of lives. So it's a very important part of beach safety. And when you have storms like this just offshore, oftentimes these rip currents get very, very aggressive. So we talked to Lieutenant Dan, and here's what he had to say.
So if you're caught in a rip current, you're at a lifeguarded beach, you're swimming in front of the lifeguard, you find that you're trying to swim to shore and you can't, and you realize you're in a rip current, you're going to wave to the lifeguard. Give a big wave, yell for help. Now, the old adage used to be swim parallel to shore. So you do want to swim parallel to shore if you can, but you want to swim parallel to shore with the current. Best advice is if you're tired and you wore yourself out fighting that rip current, all you do is float. Lay on your back and float and wait for the lifeguard to come and get you. People get in trouble because they try to swim against that rip current. And they say in a strong rip current, Michael Phelps couldn't swim against it. So just float and wait for help, and make sure that you've called for help and the lifeguard will come and get you.
Hey, interesting. New way to kind of think about things. I don't know that I would have ever thought if he didn't say to just float.
Yeah. Well, the one little problem with all of that though is if you don't have a lifeguard. If you don't have a lifeguard, okay, again, the floating is still a good idea because eventually the rip current doesn't last forever, and then you would be able to come back in. But the real key, don't panic. Don't panic.
Yeah, that's where people get in trouble too.
Don't swim against it. Yeah, don't swim against the current, and don't panic because you can still float. That's a good point. Hey, we got more top stories.
Oh yeah, we do. Oh yeah, we are chocked full of them. Weather is all we do here. Let's talk about the heat and how nasty it's about to get here as we get into essentially the western half of the United States. It's already gross out there. Grand Junction got up to 99 yesterday. We're going to be in record territory tomorrow, which I'm thrilled about because we got a massive kickball game scheduled for 6 o'clock in the afternoon, Jim.
See, that's rough. But look at the triple digits. Salt Lake City, down to
101.
Great Falls.
Yeah.
Great Falls, Montana. Yeah, they're under a heat advisory, by the way. Not a big surprise. Giant area of high pressure is just dominating things. Now, by the way, because we have cooler air on the east side of the country, that tends to mean on the west side you got the high, and that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah, and I actually, we've gotten a question from Caleb William on Facebook. What are our thoughts on that persistent East Coast troughing and how much we think that can stick around? I'm of the belief that this ridge is here for like an eternity because it's on top of us right now. But it doesn't look like that's going to be much of the case. It should break down next week at least.
An eternity is for the rest of the week, okay? For the rest of the week that's probably going to happen. But now, as we get towards September, these fronts coming out of Canada, they have a little more oomph. And you can feel that in the Northeast. But unfortunately, until this high starts to break down as well, it's not going to change out west.
Yeah, and it's going to be one of these tough spots to get into. Let's get you out to one of the cool spots, though.
Our spotlight city of the day.
Oh, yeah. Gunquit, Maine. Old Rick up there is taunting us, if you will, with some of the cooler weather and some of the cooler visuals out there. Here's some good news for you, Rick. You're eventually going to get warm as we get into this extended forecast here for you. Supposed to be around 80 degrees. How about 68 this afternoon? Get out of here. I'm going to be texting some folks up into the Northeast. Steve Glazier, look out. You've been warned here. You're enjoying too nice of weather. You'll get a little closer to average here as we go throughout the rest of this week and into this weekend. Hey, we're going to go back on social media. Hang out with us, ask more questions.
All right, so we now have gotten rid of all of our TV people, and it's just us and our social media friends that are left. And I do believe we have yet another question that's coming in from one of the platforms.
Yeah, and it looks like it's from Nancy on Facebook, Nancy Holbrook there. What is more dangerous from a hurricane, storm surge or wind? Jim, I'll let you answer that because I know what the saying is.
Yeah, obviously, the storm surge has always killed more people than the wind. But that doesn't mean that the wind's not dangerous.
Don't sleep on that. Yeah, exactly. Don't.
But typically, especially worldwide, now here in the United States, we've done a little bit better, but like in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, when you'd have these typhoons in that part of the world and in other areas of the world, where you have most of the populations right next to the ocean, you'd have these storm surges would come in and literally 100,000 people would be.
Because you don't know any better. You don't know where it's coming from. The science just wasn't there yet either.
And in my personal experience and all the hurricanes that I have lived through, the storm surge by far is the most dangerous thing. I'll never forget after Hurricane Ike, where we had the Bolivar Peninsula. And there was a lot of people, because of Hurricane Rita, when we had, right after Katrina, Hurricane Rita kind of went about 40, 50 miles to the east. And so a lot of folks who had evacuated said, I'm never going to evacuate again because they were wrong. That's really not a very wise thing to do, because then Ike came 3 years later in 2008 and basically wiped away the Bolivar Peninsula. And because it was just the situation with the storm surge. So storm surge always is going to be the most dangerous thing. Personally, I'm not really a fan of either one, the wind or the storm surge. But that's probably the best answer for that question.
Yeah, I've always heard you run from water, you hide from the wind. You can get into an interior-most room and kind of hunker down a little bit. There's nothing you can do when you got either freshwater flooding or you got storm surge kind of moving into your house. So that's what we always try to remind folks, and try not to get complacent out there with the forecast.
Well, and the other thing about all of that is timing too, because people think that the storm will arrive at a certain time. Well, a lot of times the storm surge, the elevated tides come 10, 12 hours before the storm actually hits. And that's why, like on from the Bolivar Peninsula going now to the Outer Banks, they have to get everybody off, because once that water starts to come in, then the bridges are washed out and you are now stuck, and you never ever want to be in that situation. Well, hey, we appreciate you spending some time with us this morning. We had some really good questions today. I always enjoyed that. And well, hang in there. We'll talk to you soon.
We got more TV to do here.
Yeah, try to stay cool out west. Oof.
Pass.
All
Hard
right.
pass on that.
Have a great day, guys.